So what does that look like when we are moving away from the standard method of teaching where I come in, I open my PowerPoint, I talk through the slide deck? What would that look like? Which is why I've now built this dashboard like 7 times. So these are the learnings from last week when I started to fully digitize my teaching. One of the really big caveats here is that in the business school that I teach at, we really want to move away from your kind of standard, you're talking through your lecture with a series of slide decks, and there are like difficulties, or more so like the brain is just used to having certain things. For example, like if I talk at you and there's no material, you kind of have nothing to ground what it is I'm talking about. So this happened like quite a lot when we're going into art school, where, you're not really taught specifically about how to be an artist. So you're looking at different things and there's a lot of different topics, and sometimes it kind of makes sense with what you're trying to learn, but a lot of times you have to make these really large cognitive leaps and read things and try to see how that fits with your own practice. And anyway, basically, this is not what we do in business school. One of the things that I've been thinking about is what it looks like in sort of like this contemporary way of learning and teaching. And because AI is going to drastically change how we're going to teach, I wanted to sort of start testing things. One of the things that I know from listening to a lot of podcasts, reading things, and blending between the models of how I was taught, which is predominantly Socratic Method. So the Socratic Method is really talking through a lot of things. I think because art school isn't necessarily a very familiar territory for people, the Socratic Method is also used in law school, where you're really talking through a lot of different cases, how people are approaching things. We at art school did a very similar approach. My entire education, my undergrad, my graduate degree, and I think even to some component of my PhD was very much about the Socratic Method, where you are actually just asking a lot of questions and thinking through the meaning, how things actually relate to each other, and you are basically learning through that method. And so that is something that I do a lot in my own teaching. Now, how would that actually look when you are using a platform like mine? And what does that look like for a customization or a customized dashboard to go into? So this is what I've been working on. This is where it becomes, I think, kind of important to figure out, I want something that helps me as a prof distill where the student think they are. And that sort of having these types of quote unquote filter is helpful here. So how many years of business have you been in? What is the primary industry that you were working in? Let's choose these. What kind of a learner am I? Visual. And I'm thinking that I want each of these components to be a different AI assistant on the back, just helping guide the conversation. So depending on whatever is clicked, that the dashboard you go into will be customized for that type of learning. And then AI comfort, because there is a lot of AI component. Like I was just saying, that there's a lot of bots that I'm building on the back to go and power this type of dashboard for learning and teaching. So let's say that I like visual, which is true. I like visual learning style. So my AI comfort level, so we can either have nothing. So that or an AI study assistant. Maybe you need something other. Maybe you're really, really advanced and you're quite comfortable with your AI usage. And then what does that look like in terms of your weekly commitment for this course? And then lastly, my course is specific to 1, business ethics, and 2, the 10 weeks in the term really is, at the end of the day, helping you build your own bot. The students are building out an ethical bot through a specific lens. We go through every week the materials based on the syllabus. And then each week they have a series of activities they need to go through to work through what we call a product requirement document. So a PRD for short. So this is what this is actually asking for. It's like, what is your PRD for? What is it focusing on? What company is it? Etc. and etc. So that's what this would look like. All right, so all the information now has been input. Let's see what this would look like. So this is what we see currently. There's a series of information that sort of, I still need to figure out what this kind of can do, or what this actually would really, I don't really know how AI has decided this. That very much confuses me. This I do understand. My initial hope was that there would be a place for students to come in, and if they needed help, ask questions, etc., there would be some sort of an assistant somewhere. And then this recommendation, I also don't really know what to do with this. I have to actually be quite honest here. I find that a lot of times because I'm not really 100% sure what I'm looking for. I know I want these things, but I have no idea what the output looks like. I find AI to be like quite helpful for me to go and build out these types of dashboards. And then I take it to class to see how well received they are. I would say that my learning from last week to this week is that the students tried really hard to make sense of how things flow, just because it is such a big shift from having your standard, like PowerPoint presentation, somebody talking through it, you do the worksheets, you go and plug it into a PRD, versus actually going through your class through like these components inside a dashboard and then making sense of it. Which is why for me, it's like, I'm trying to go and figure out like, what does this mean? Like what does recommendation mean? The industry specific content. I think that this is fine, except that again, like there are these fundamental gaps that sort of, I don't know how one links to two. And what I find that I do quite often is ask like ChatGPT, like what was the reasoning behind doing this? Like, because it does actually require a lot of that fill in the blanks that kind of doesn't really make a lot of sense. Then we move into this component of the modules. These are the entirety of the course. Like these are all the single weeks of what it is the students will be going through. And this week we're currently in week 7. So I would then therefore have to link what week 7 is into this so they can actually go into this class and see what it is that we're doing. This PRD milestone, so because we're already in week 7, that's the students should actually have quite a lot of the PRD completed, and then they should be able to start plugging in the information to see what that would look like, what they want to go and adjust. Again, I think like these are good. These are good sort of like as a dashboard to figure out like where they are. Is it in progress? Have they not started at all? And then these would be, again, I'm not like 100% sure what this is. So I probably have to get rid of this. And then I wanted to have a dashboard to go and figure out what this looks like for me on the back end. What I'm more interested in figuring out is where the attrition rate is. So like where students start falling, where are they not using the resources that they could, and then figuring out like, is it because you don't know what it does? Is it because, what is the actual reasoning here? So in terms of this, I'm going to have to go and ask ChatGPT what some of these components are meant to do and how it kind of came up with this information. Let's move on to what this week is going to look like in terms of the learning. This is currently what I have built for this week. It's significantly more streamlined in comparison to last week, where there were so many moving parts in the dashboard. I've really wanted that the main dashboard that we were just going through, that is the home base that students get to go back out to. In terms of what they need to learn, we are doing a sustainability. I've also tried to go and make this much more clear in terms of explaining how the logic flows for our course this week. So you can see that there is like, we're working with a case, and then there's an overview, we're working with the case, then we go into the actual lesson. There are worksheets that they need to complete, and then based on all the things, they run into a simulation. Out of the simulation, and dependent on what the decisions were made, they're going to go and input that into their PRD, so their product requirement document. So these are all the components that we see for this week. I always start off with a core issue. I've really changed my method of thinking and teaching to presenting a core problem at the beginning, so students will be able to find all the components of how to answer this problem or how to approach this problem based on the lecture topics. This is the case. This is a really high level case of what we're going through this week, and then these are the learning objectives that they have to have. I actually have already built out an assistant for them that if and when they need to go into asking for extra help, how to approach building out this PRD, they actually have an assistant to help them. These are the tasks for this week's class. I build out my entire case. I've tried to go and make this case a lot more extensive than I generally would. I even went so far as thinking about, what would this look like if I wanted to go and make this into sort of like a treasure map. This is sort of how I approach a lot of my thinking when I'm reading through different cases or I'm trying to go and collect different types of evidence support material. I sort of map it out in my head as to like where everything could be, and then find linkages between them. So in terms of this is what we're working with, that the students are looking through this case, and then they have the task is quite explicitly listed. Then they have a deliverable of what needs to be done. I've now also added in this component where students are able to highlight this, and they can do whatever. They can copy paste this. So copy, paste into this section, and then they can save it, and then it gets recorded. I think what is important for students to recognize in a situation like this is why they think that what has been saved is important for them. So understanding that we are working with the case, then we're going to go into the actual lesson where there are all the concepts that we need to go through. And when I say we, I really mean me, that I need to go through and explain how everything sort of fits. So what is this? Why does this matter? How to apply it? And then having a real life example. So this week in total, we have 8 concepts that we need to go through. Every single one of these concepts should already be integrated into this case. And so students will need to find where these components are within the case to go and see how it actually answers this core issue that has been presented. How we see student learning or how we measure some of this is figuring out these worksheets. So again, I have already put in sort of the different types of guardrails in terms of how to go and take this information and auto-populate this into this. And students can open multiple windows to work through these things as we're working through each of the topics. So it might actually just be me with the projector, with the lesson, with the actual concept here going through that, and then students can look at the worksheet at the same time. So there's a little bit more. It's not just like, again, staring at me with the PowerPoint, but it's them opening the worksheet at the same time as I'm going through the lesson. And then based on the outcome or like whatever has been completed in the worksheet. So every single topic will have its own corresponding worksheet that students are working through based on the case and the information from the case. They will go into the simulation of meeting with the leadership to figure out what strategy would look like. This entire thing is just that all those worksheets, really at the end of the day, you are just summarizing everything into a sentence or two. From there, they need to go and write very quick memo So it prefaces what you will be doing in your simulation when you're meeting with leadership. I have a quality check. And then at the bottom here, they also have a component of how to go and defend what it is that they're talking about. That's what happens, right? When you go into a leadership meeting, you need to be able to defend what it is that you're talking about, or at least like have the reasons to go and explain to somebody. Then lastly, we go into the actual simulation. Whatever has been decided, your decisions, you go through that. And then students will be able to go and update their PRD. And that is actually fully what it is that I am working with this week. I'm going to test to see whether it works. And I'm going to just keep trying. That's it for today.